G'day guys, welcome to Scotch Down Under. As you can see, we're on location. So I'm currently standing in the warehouse in Albany, WA at the Limeburners Distillery. An absolutely awesome aroma is wafting through this warehouse. And if you can only stand here, you would understand how awesome it is. So earlier today, I got to sit down with Cameron Syme, the owner of the distillery, and over a few of the expressions, we got to talk about some of the ethos that he has with his company and some of the amazing whiskey that he's producing. So right here, we've got some new make.
Yeah, new make spirit. I thought this would be a good place to start so we can have a look at the spirit as it comes straight out of the still. Of course, absolutely no colour from the cask influence.
No, pure white.
Pure white. So, and in America, you know, white dog would be one of the names they would call this. Interestingly, some people would talk about moonshine too, but that's to me got particular reference to grain recipes. So this is single malt spirit, or malt spirit we would call it. And I thought it'd be good to look at in terms of just seeing the aromas and the characteristics come through from the grain and from the yeast, and really that's all that we're looking for. I'm expecting to get some nice malty characteristics, a bit of dryness, a little bit of marzipan notes coming through as well.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's true to form for ours.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting the yeast and the barley coming through straight away.
Yeah.
And you said this was 70?
About 74%.
74?
So we would dilute this down to 64.5% before we barrel it. So we barrel everything at this stage is 64.5%.
Yep.
This is one big science experiment, if you like. So we do play around a little bit and create different styles of whiskey, and then sort of go back and see how they appear. So we're looking at different casking strengths at the moment, but up to this stage, Limeburn has always been 64.5.
64.5. That's a good number.
Well, I think we should try this. Cheers.
Cheers.
A little bit of a sparkle, which I'd expect for new spirit. Very malt, very malt, warm chocolate characteristics coming through.
That's nice.
You like it?
That is very nice. There's definitely nothing like the high ABV doesn't come through, doesn't whack you in the face. It's smooth, subtle, and as you say, you've got all those lovely characteristics coming through in that end palate. It's like a chocolatey. I like that.
You like it?
That is nice.
And I think for 74.5, that's incredibly smooth.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is. Now, and we were talking about science off camera before, and for me, we work at a molecular level every day. So one thing to remember is alcohol is a solvent.
Yeah.
And at high strength, the alcohol dissolves the flavour molecules, and the flavour molecules attach to the ethanol molecules, and you can't actually taste all the flavour. As you add water to it, if I talk fully science for a second, if you add water to the solution, then the flavour molecules, those solids, will precipitate back out of the solution again, and then you can actually taste a lot more flavour. So for me personally, you know, I like having water with my whiskey.
Yeah, same.
And now people will say to me, Cameron, what's the right way to drink whiskey, or the best way to drink it? And I say to them, the best way to drink whiskey is how you like it.
Exactly. We're always an advocate for that. How you like it is the whiskey you like to drink, how you like to drink it.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm not going to say, I mean, Coke, I might now. Although when I started my journey, I'd have to be honest and say I was certainly an American whiskey and cola, Coke.
I think a lot of us started that way.
Absolutely, but thankfully my palate's moved on. What I would like to do is put a bit of water in this. So if I'm testing for faults, I will bring it back to 22%, because by that stage, all of those solids are precipitated out and we can actually taste.
So all those esters and all that stuff coming out is going to be released.
Going to be released at that lower strength. So for fault testing, 22 or 22.5. And certainly if you're looking for faulty faint cuts or anything else in your distilling process, that's where you'll get those fainty characteristics coming through.
Yep. So
it's certainly rounded out. So there's almost a little bit of pickles type of characteristic there, a little bit of sourness.
Getting that little sour, like you say, a pickle kind of something that's in a vinegar. I'm still getting the yeast and the barley coming through.
Yep, a lot more estery now as those characteristics come out. Now I'd be judging that's still going to be 30-35% ABV. You know, again, I think very smooth. It's rolling across my whole palate from front to back, which is what I'm looking for, a full mouthfeel. And it feels quite thick in my mouth. It's not a thin spirit at all. It's really, you know, quite beautiful.
It was coating, So there's all the oils are lovely coating it.
So look, I think that's a fantastic way to sort of look at how does your spirit appear out of the still. From my perspective, it's a quality in, quality out issue.
Totally.
Yep. So if you start with rubbish spirit, no matter how good the barrels are, you're never going to end up with good spirit at the end. So, and when I'm nosing, I'd go in for my first lot of nosing and identify the key characteristics there, and then I'll go back and I'll sort of try and have a sniff a bit deeper. So I did a couple of perfume making courses in Paris to try and just expand my professional knowledge, and they talk about top notes, middle note, base notes. So I'm trying to really go through and then identify what can I pick out at each one of those levels.
Yep.
So I try to ignore those first characteristics coming through, and then see, right, what else is below that? What else can I identify?
Yeah, what's hiding underneath.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. And do you add more water and dilute it a bit more and see what opens up?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, I would. But I think, for us to look at this today, I think that's
that
beautiful.
is really good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Really touched by that. I think it's a very, it's a clean, clear, crisp spirit. Now we use hard water for making our whiskey.
That's from the balls?
Yeah, so if I wear my marketing hat, I'd say we source our water from limestone aquifers deep beneath the distillery. And if I take off my marketing hat, I'd say we use Albany tap water, which comes from these limestone aquifers deep beneath the distillery.
That's filtered through, and yeah.
So this is, it is old water. It is out of these limestone aquifers. So it's a very hard water. It's got lots of minerals and calcium that's in the water.
Yep.
It's not great water in terms of showering with because it's quite hard. But in terms of brewing, it's fantastic because the calcium and the minerals that are in there are building blocks that the life of the yeast needs as it grows and propagates. It actually helps create this really healthy sort of environment for the yeast.
Okay.
So we don't need to add yeast food or do anything else. I'd be saying we're very traditionalist. We've got 5 ingredients to whiskey: malted barley, water, yeast, a barrel, and thyme, and they're the 5 things. So that hard water, I think, makes a real difference. And if you think about a lot of the well-known worldwide distilleries, Jack Daniels, for example, will talk about sourcing their water from a limestone cave.
Yeah.
So again, I think that hard water actually creates a beautiful spirit.
Yeah, as you say, a lot of distilleries really focus on their water, where they get their source from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had 16 years of research before I set my distillery up. I drove about 10,000 kilometres plus around the whole lot of the southwest of WA looking for the best spot for a whiskey distillery. Albany kept coming up trumps.
Yep.
Good hard water and plenty of volume to it. Renewable energy, because we've got the wind farm here and now we have solar panels as well.
Yeah.
We're always trying to minimise footprint. Access to great grain, really nice sort of cooler Mediterranean climate, which means less evaporates, the angels get less, if you like. So all of those things sort of pointed towards Albany being the best place in WA for it. And certainly I think now after 15 years of distilling down here, and while we try to be humble, certainly having won a number of worldwide awards.
Lots of awards,
yeah. I think that's sort of paying off that our site selection was very good. I also had built-in babysitters because my wife's parents lived here. No, that wasn't part of the selection process. But certainly, look, Albany was this beautiful place, the first European settlement in Western Australia, and was actually a really good place in terms of European and Indigenous engagement. We got along very well down here. And so there was all that nice history with the place, but really it was quality produce, great climate, great grain, great water. And the other thing, of course, is the peat bogs.
I'm quite interested about that. So you don't get it locally in Albany, you'd be to get it from the giants up.
The Valley of the Giants, we do. So I had a soil scientist roll up here one day, very tall, lovely bloke called Tim. He rolls in and he goes, "Oh, Cameron, I love my whiskey. I know that you are looking for peat and you're talking about the Porongurups." I said, "Yep." He said, "Well, that's the wrong place because that's a sandy peat. You need a vegetative peat, and it only grows. You need a lack of oxygen and the right acidity in your soil to create." So peat is decomposing vegetable matter from the bottom of a swamp. Sounds really attractive.
It's awesome stuff.
Awesome stuff. So the soil scientist came through and he said he was going to a farmer's field day, and would I mind if he asked some farmers if they had peat to get in touch with us. Of course, I was like, small community, great, thanks very much. 2 days later, a Marina farmer rings us up and he says, "You're looking for some peat? I've got plenty." So we went and visited him. Phenomenal amount of peat there. It's like 3-4 metres deep, this peat bog.
Wow.
Yeah. And the soil scientist came back to me and he said, "There's actually a nice connection between the Valley of the Giants in Walpole and here, because that is Cretaceous period peat, so old dinosaur peat, very, very old."
Yeah.
And in fact, there used to be a river that ran all the way from Princess Royal Harbour here right up to those peat fields. So there's this, I guess, dinosaur connection. Absolutely. So all of that worked really well. We started off bartering for our peat, and we'd swap bottles of whiskey for trailer loads of peat. And I was a bit concerned. We trying to make sure we operate an ethical business. And I said to the farmer, our friend, I said, "Oh, you know, are you okay with this?" And he goes, "Cameron, otherwise it's garden mulch. It's like $20 a trailer load. You'll give me a bottle of great whiskey. I'm feeling a winner."
Win.
Absolutely. That worked really well. And of course, we've done very well with our peated whiskies. We won, we're the first Australian whiskey ever to win a gold medal at the London IWSC. And we won Best Craft Whiskey in the World in America through the ADI. And then Jim Murray in his Whiskey Bible gave us Best Whiskey in the Southern Hemisphere. That was all with the same peated. So we now have a security of supply. We have an arrangement with our farmer now where we pay him a certain amount of money each year, plus we give him whiskey for peat. So again, it's a win-win. But once people got to know that we had this great peat supply there, of course, he had lots of people knocking on his door. Yep. And he said to me, he said, "Look, I'd much rather keep it available for Limeburners than."
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So and it's a great supply there, so you're not going to run out.
We will not run out.
Oh,
no,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Look, it's huge, beautiful place, and from that point of view, yeah, we know that we'll have thousands of years of peat for our whiskey supply. And I don't think I'll be around then, but somebody else might be carrying on the Limeburners legacy
and still getting the same peat. Oh, that's amazing. I did try. I was back down in October, and I hadn't tried the peat one yet, and I tried it, and it was absolutely delicious.
So much different from a Scottish peat.
Yeah, totally.
And that's because of the vegetation that's going into the edge of the swamp, or the bog as they'd call it, is much different here, of course, from what you'd get in Scotland or anywhere else.
Because you've got massive trees going into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, I think from a marketing point of view, that Valley of the Giants is fantastic, but actually to know that we're sort of hand collecting this in a bit of a sustainable manner, I think is really quite important as well.
You can't get better than that. No. Purely natural product, purely natural processes, ecological, go green.
Absolutely. Now, do you think we should move on from this to a barrel-aged whiskey now? And
something that's had a little bit of experience in a barrel?
I think so. I think that'd be a good call.
I'll have another sip because this is really good.
So it's getting
now we've opened up a bit more.
Yeah, a bit fatter on the nose now. Again, very easy to drink. It's not a bad or an off flavour at all in that. I might be slightly biased, but
I have to agree with you because that ABV you would expect with a lot of white spirits that a lot of people try. It's quite strong, and if you're not accustomed to it, it really smacks you around. But this is smooth as. This does not have that ABV. We have watered it down, but even before that, it did not have that really strong ABV burn or any of that. It was really subtle, smooth, rounded.
And still a very long finish. So
yeah, the finish just goes on and on.
Yeah. That's one thing that Jim Murray and a couple of other guys have said to us, Cameron, your whiskies have a phenomenally long finish. So it's certainly coming not just from the barrel influence, but from the spirit itself.
Yep.
Which again, I think is a really important thing. For me, it'll take me longer to drink a dram of whiskey than it will my friends to drink a beer. And that's because I think I'm enjoying it and the flavour's staying and I'm just enjoying that.
I'm exactly the same. Yeah. I was saying earlier that, I'll sit down with a good dram. I'll sit on that for an hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And just experience it, enjoy it, and let those flavours just roll through.
Yeah.
And as you're saying before, that palate, it's still going. It's like I'm chewing on some barley. It's just lovely going through, a little bit of vanilla and...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that is, it's good. It's almost there's waves of different flavours that come through. Yeah. Well, maybe we should park this one. Put him back there so we can come back to him later. And I might be able to say, here's one I've prepared earlier. All right, so port cask, this is part of our staple range. So all of our whiskies, or 95% of our whiskies, go into American oak old bourbon barrels first. We consider that's really important in terms of maturing the whiskey nicely and slowly. Obviously, if you use new oak, you're going to get a lot of extraction coming out of that oak. Yeah. Whereas if we use older casks, then it's a slower, more gentle process for the whiskey to go through.
Yep.
One of the other things we're spoilt with in Australia is access to fortified wine casks. Now, the lawmakers would have us say that we cannot use the term port or sherry anymore in Australia. And I would say, well, actually, they're anglicised terms anyway.
That's right.
There's Jerez for sherry and there's Oporto for port. But Australia, of course, has this long history of European immigration. And we're in the Swan Valley, particularly in Western Australia, we've got vineyards up there well over 100 years old people have bought vines from the mother country and created fortified wine over here. So I would still say port to Australian in the vernacular means red fortified wine.
Generations of it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Sherry is white fortified wine.
Yeah.
They want us to use this term apera for sherry, and you ask people, what does apera mean? And you get this sort of blank, I don't know.
Sherry?
Yeah, sherry. It's sherry. And they want us to use tawny or ruby in place of port.
Yeah, a lot of it's tawny now. You can't use port.
Yeah, well, now you can't for a wine perspective, but we can for a spirits perspective. I've just retired from being a lawyer, so I sort of play this. Well, we still can because we're not selling wine. It's a whiskey, so there's this whiskey influence. The other important thing to remember is that port and sherry are still used in Canada and America. They haven't got rid of those terms. So I'm sort of going, I presume Australia did it to get market access to some European markets. Whereas I really think, if we put on apera or tawny or ruby, people have got no idea. If you say sherry or port, they know bang on what it is.
Straight away.
Yeah. So we're very fortunate. We can source very old port casks. And we source them from Margaret River, Swan Valley, South Australia, New South Wales. Sometimes we'll get access to some really old muscat casks. There's some others, some PX, Pedro Ximenez that we've had access to. Some Takei, which a lot of people say they think is probably the premium of all fortified. So we're very lucky having built now relationships over 15 years with winemakers, where we have some of our casks that go up to the fortified winemakers. They use our old whiskey barrels for maturing fortifieds. After they've used them for 5 or 6 years, and they'll come back to us. Plus we'll source 40 and 50-year-old fortified casks elsewhere. So yeah, I think that creates this beautiful, richly coloured dark spirit.
Yeah, and you're non-chill filtered and non-coloured, so
we don't. We add nothing to it. I saw your review of the American oak, where there was do they put colour in? Absolutely not. So non-chill filtered, have to do a little bit of what we call cold stabilisation, so we get it down to about 3 degrees above zero. Chill filtered is, in technical sense, 0, -2 and below. And the difficulty we have, we didn't cold stabilise anything at all, but then we had one of the big national distributors say that white waxy substance that comes out of it that people complain about, we know it's good, but the consumers, the uneducated consumers, be like,
when they cloud up and go, what's going on?
Exactly. This is a port cask strength, so it's 61% ABV.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that.
We don't worry about it. So this has had absolutely nothing. It'll have 43%, so we will do a cold stabilisation, but it's not a chill filter. It's definitely much different. So let me put some of this in here for you.
Cool.
Now, this particular style, as I say, is part of our core expressions. We do American oak,
the sherry
and the port cask, as core whiskies. And this one has won international medals for 12 years in a row. So even our very first whiskey we ever released as a 2-year-old, we sent off to London to the IWSC, International Wine and Spirits Competition, which I think is the world's longest running comp. They have 2 panels of judges, 2 independent panels, and both panels have to award you a medal before you'll get a medal.
Oh, okay.
Plus they send your product off for scientific analysis. So things like additives, or if you put in distiller's caramel, they'd pick that up. Yeah. So we choose our competitions carefully to make sure they're credible judges and good process. And we picked up a bronze medal there with a 2-year-old whiskey, which I was just blown away with.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
So just getting some very strong, port, spicy fruitcake characteristics coming through.
Yeah, that fruitcake is coming through. Yep.
61%, again, I think incredibly smooth for that. There's not a burn.
Beautiful,
harshness.
buttery, smooth, big mouthful of fruitcake. Yeah,
you can come
lovely.
and describe our spirits anytime. So I think
that is delicious.
There is some of the alcohol now. There's actually more alcohol coming off this than we were getting out of that new make spirit from before. So there's more of that.
It's not offensive, but it's on the top. Yeah, as you say, it's on the top.
Now, again, for me personally, I like my whiskies at between 30 and 40%. So whenever I get a new bottle of whiskey, I'll pour myself a dram, and then I add a little bit of water and taste it, add a bit more water and taste it, and a bit more, and I'll hit a sweet spot, because you'll get to a point where you add more water and then you go, oh, no, that's
it's gone too far.
Too far.
Yeah.
So I would say my general rule of thumb is to 30 to 40%, which would mean this is 61% alcohol. I could almost add equal parts water to whiskey.
Yeah.
Now, some other distillers look at me and go, you're crazy, what are you doing adding that much? But I think when people get to see cask strength whiskey, because this is as it sits in the barrel, that's when they get to appreciate the benefit of adding a bit of water with it. It's rich, it's sweet, really robust. And it's that full palate again, so right from the front of my tongue, through the middle, through to the back, it's that full palate experience. And it's got that fatness, and the flavour is hanging around. It's not just a there and gone, you know, it's still lingering and lingering and lingering.
I'm just nodding yes, it's rolling around right at the back of the tongue, on the side, and the cheeks, at the top. Yeah, it's all there, yeah.
So we do this as a cask strength. We also do this as a 43% expression. And the only difference between those is a cask strength for us is a single cask release.
Yep.
Whereas our 43%, we will get 5 or 6 or 10 casks and marry them together.
So you're sticking them in a vat and let them sit for a while?
Let them sit for quite a while, and then we use a Solera system on all of our 43%. So, you know, we'll start, say, if you said, for example, 1,000 litres, we'll draw it down to 500 litres and bottle it, and then we'll top it back up to 1,000 litres again. One of the criticisms we had in the early days was that there was too much variability between release to release because we were doing single casks for everything.
Yeah.
And of course, each cask is going to taste different. So part of our growth curve has been to say, okay, let's put something out for consumers that has more consistency to it. So yes, there'll still be variation, but because we use the large number of casks in that Solera system, that is a longer or a more gradual change in process.
You're going to get a relative consistency.
Absolutely, yeah. Should we really have a little bit of water with
A little
this
drop,
one?
yes.
Now, you're only a drop of it.
A tiny drop.
It's going to be hard to judge with this one. And I'll be having a bit more of my personal preference. Now, I certainly opened this up.
It has, isn't it?
It's broader, but also a little bit flatter, if you like. So there's a wider range of aromas coming off it, but it's almost like a narrower band of flavours.
So now, before I was eating a big mouthful of lovely, fresh Christmas cake or Christmas pudding, I was just chewing on that. Now I'm having it with ice cream and yeah.
A lot more vanilla presence. Still has that, you know, quite a strong influence of that grapey component from the barrel coming through. No harsh notes.
Oh, that's good.
A little bit of back palate umami, I'd call it, which so in those five flavours.
So that's like a savoury.
Yeah, I think the best way for me to describe umami is like when you have miso soup.
Okay.
So it is savoury, and it's almost like I feel the back of my palate stand up. It's very much.
That's what I've got. Yeah, it's sitting up there.
That's exactly right. So to me, that's that umami sort of flavour. But we are getting that salty, you know, sweet, sour, bitter. And this is touching each one of those main flavours on your palate. And from what I've read, you get about 25,000 aromas through your nose.
Yeah, the olfactory system is more important than the actual taste buds.
Absolutely.
Exactly
So what we'll be doing by breathing in now is getting it up at the back of our palate, right where the key of that olfactory receptors are. So I think that's a really good way to explore it. It's a tough job.
It's really, really horrible job. How do you do it?
That's my least favourite part of the week. No, look, when I first started the distillery, of course, I'd be in the barrel store every week checking the barrels. You know, now we've got 1,000+ barrels. It's like, I check them when they're, you know, sort of getting ready for selection. But it is tough. It is very hard to be looking to produce, you know, world-class whiskey time after time after time. And there's always this pressure, I guess, of making sure that you've got good quality whiskey.
That you've got it right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the last thing you want is your customers go, well, I don't know what you've done.
Well, look, there are some people who, you know, there's a bit on social media, and I don't participate in that much anymore, but there are certainly comments on social media where some people go, you're still very variable. I'm like, well, we're not variable because we do that Solera system, guys, but some people like Ford, some people like Holden, some people like BMW, and I just go, you know what, if you like it, that's great, fantastic. If you don't, no worries.
That's exactly right. Everyone's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So I've drank mine, but I'm just loving the smell on the glass that's left over.
Now, and that's a good thing to do.
I always like doing that.
Because once you've got an empty glass, all of the alcohol vapour's gone. So really, all that you're getting at that stage is those flavour compounds coming through.
Yep.
And particularly if you're looking for faults, that is the time that a fault. So
they will come through.
They'll come through then. Yep.
So I'm getting a little bit of lemongrass.
Yeah. Okay.
And almost like a dry hay.
Right, definitely getting that dry hay, grassy, almost that barnyardy type of character.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
A little bit of saltiness there too, and of course the distillery here is right on the edge of Princess Royal
you
Harbour.
can throw a stone over to the harbour.
Yep. So, you know, inevitably because we're aging our whiskey here, there is going to be some interaction with that coastal, aromas from the salt.
Yeah.
So I think that might be a little bit of that savoury component just coming through as well.
And when I'm home and I feel a bit homesick, I have a dram of Limeburners.
You're a good
back
man.
home.
You're a good man, absolutely. It's been good from my point of view. A lot of people from Albany have said, look, you're actually doing us proud. People from Western Australia have said this is phenomenal. We've got this tiny little distillery that's punching well above its weight, producing these phenomenal world standard whiskies. It's good for WA. So they were never things that I had tried to pursue. I was just like, look, I want to
Make some great whiskey.
some great whiskey. And the fact that Western Australia have really taken this on and gone, this is our home spirit.
Well, your idea of making some great whiskey, everyone is really appreciating that you are making some great whiskey. and it's not only promoting Albany and WA, it's promoting Australia internationally.
Yeah.
Like this is getting recognised. Like a lot of, as I say, the competitions and even people that haven't tried Australian whiskies are trying these and really appreciating what you're actually doing here.
No, look, I think you're right there. We just had some correspondence from our Germany fans, and they took some of our darkest winter to a whiskey show in Germany, and some people rolled up saying, hey, we were at the distillery in last year, we're so happy we can get Limeburners here. Other people coming past saying they're coming to visit our distillery this year. So it does have that, now people are going, right, we want to go and visit the distillery.
So now you actually got some tourism happening as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
I'm wondering whether we should journey into the world of peated whiskey.
Ooh.
I say to people, if this is the equivalent of a peace activist, we're about to move into the world of nuclear advocates, because peated whiskey is a totally different beast from a non-peated whiskey.
It is either you love it or you don't.
Yeah.
It's one of those, yeah. And there's not very many people that have never tried a peat whiskey and they try it straight away and they fall in love with it.
Very rare.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I never tried a peat whiskey and I tried it and that was it.
What was your gateway?
Lagavulin.
I was going to say Lagavulin 16.
You got it.
Yeah, that's my gateway peated whiskey as well.
Yeah.
That was probably the first. I'd had a few others, and I was like, Lefroy, I'm not so keen on that.
I still like all those.
Oh,
but
I do too, but I had to mature into them.
Yep.
I think as a first introduction to peated whiskey, they were a bit more confronting, if you like.
especially with the iodine. And
I'd almost say, look, they punch you in the mouth, whereas I think the Lagavulin 16 is just a phenomenal whiskey. You can go anywhere in the world and find it and know it's a bang on peat.
It's like having a hug with a real long time friend every time I have a Lagavulin 16.
That's a really good description. This whiskey is our called heavy peat. It's a bit misleading because it's not full of iodine in the bottom of an ashtray. A peat bog has 3 layers to it, and in Scotland they'd call the top layer the fog, and that usually has more roots in there. The middle layer they'd call yavi, and the bottom layer is called peat. Now, depending upon which layer of the peat bog you get your peat from, depends upon the characteristics that come out. Yeah. So this is really our middle layer of peat that goes into our heavy peat, and this was the first peated whiskey that we released. This was the one that won Australian Champion Whisky twice and picked up gold medal in London. So this is it's a phenomenal whiskey. It is $700 a bottle, or 700 and something now a bottle, but it is single cask, very small batches, and just without doubt, every person who tries this goes phenomenal. And look, interestingly, from my point of view, this is sold in a number of bars, and those venues take a 1,300% markup on this. But it's not. It is an expensive whiskey, but it is certainly world class, world standard. So I get that peaty characteristic. Peat adds an extra level of sweetness to whiskey.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think that smoke would add sweetness, but it certainly does.
It certainly does, yeah.
It's only been matured in American oak bourbon barrels.
Okay.
So this hasn't gone into the finishing casks as we would do with our other expressions. Our peated whiskies usually just go into American oak. Occasionally I'll do a director's cut, so my personal stash of barrels. One of the benefits of being the boss. We do a peated port. That sells out phenomenally fast whenever we do it. Yeah. Because that's sort of that combination between the two.
Oh, there we go. It's coming through now. I've got that peat and that fire smoke coming through right now.
And it's a little bit of a drier, smoky smell.
Yeah,
it's that Australian bush.
Yep, very eucalyptusy. Yeah. Oh God, that's good.
Now again, some higher alcohols just coming through. It is 61% ABV. So this is a cask strength. So again, what you're seeing here is whiskey as it sits in the barrel.
Yep.
But we're very confident to put this whiskey on the table and go, here is something that we think can compete at the highest international standards. or levels. And we're not trying to make the best whiskey in the world, because there's no such place as utopia. So,
No.
Yeah, this is really about going, we want something that we can proudly put up to be as good as anybody else.
I'm getting bacon. It's like smoked bacon and the smoke fired. Yeah.
That's at 61% again, for me, incredibly smooth for that ABV. Really long mouthfeel a bit. It's not as complex as the port whiskey in terms of the spicy characteristics of the barrel. It's more of that buttery vanilla, and then you've got that layer of peat, which is just sitting there and really sort of fat, oily, full mouthfeel.
I haven't even gone for a taste yet. I'm still enjoying the nose. I'm picking up the sweetness and the...
Yeah, look, I think to me again, quite strong vanilla notes, vanillins coming through, which will be the American oak, particularly charred American oak.
It's like I almost had, still haven't tasted it. I picked up, like, being in the Aussie bush after a downpour of rain, that aroma that comes off the leaves of the trees and the plants is coming through. I'm getting that coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see exactly where you're coming from. And I think, I enjoy whiskey and always have. And for me, whiskey it's probably a little bit unique in that sense of it allows you to really enjoy the experience of what you're doing. It's a special occasion thing that you remember it. Whereas I have a beer and I forget that.
Yeah. Unless it's with an exceptional location with friends and something memorable happens.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it's an experience, totally.
And look, I would say there are some phenomenal craft beers out there too that I do love, and I do remember those. But certainly when I grew up in the late 1980s, we really didn't have that big selection of.
No, it was your export and your VBs and Swan Gold and all those. Yeah. Oh, that is lovely.
Really nice, rich feel in your mouth.
It's taking me back to my youth when I was camping out in the bush.
Really?
Yeah, with a bush fire and having a billy tea, and it just brings you back.
And to be able to create memories or bring back memories for people, I think is phenomenal. That's
well, that's the best thing about whiskey, because the memories are the things that we remember from our nose.
That's it. That's association of smell.
Yeah, it all comes through. Yeah.
Absolutely. So peat. The older a whiskey is, the less intense the peat flavour is. So a young peated whiskey will be very strong. And if we looked at, say, Lefroy quarter cask, and a quarter cask like would be 100 litre barrels.
Yep.
No age statements are probably 3 years old or thereabouts. Very strong, fiery, robust peat.
That's right.
Get to your Lagavulin or Kalila, I love as well.
Same.
Yep. You get to those older expressions of peat.
It's more subtle and subdued.
It is more integrated and everything else. So we're having about a 7-year-old whiskey here. I'm just looking at my barrel number before. So this is it's a reasonably aged whiskey. No age statement, because they're not something we put on our bottles at this stage. But still, I think nice age. Rule of thumb we would say is 1 year in Australia equals 2 years in Scotland, because the climate's a bit warm and evaporation rates are a bit higher.
Yeah. All that angels share.
Angels.
I think they're just thieves.
Oh dear. Now, I could actually enjoy this without water. Okay, I can say that's a beautiful whiskey. I'm going to open it up a little bit more because I want to explore more of the flavour.
I'm the same. I can happily sit on this all day and not whinge about it whatsoever. This is really, really enjoyable, but I'm with you. I want to open up and see all those other little characteristics come through. Yeah.
So let me grab our oversized water bottle, and I'll see if I can't get one little drop for you. Well, a bit much actually. Do you want some more whiskey in there?
I won't say no.
No, it's no. I think we might need to do that so that you've only got a little drop of water in there.
Perfect.
Try that now.
Awesome.
I don't mind a little bit more water for myself.
Whoa! That is vanilla beans all day.
Well, yeah. Strong vanilla and that multi characteristic really then as your base note, and your vanilla's very strong.
Oh, that is beautiful.
It's a much sweeter smell now as well with water.
Oh, that is very nice. That's like vanilla ice cream and vanilla out of the bottle and the bean.
And I've actually got to say I've added too much water. So mine's a little bit flat now. I'm going to have to do the same as you and go back for a slight top up of my whiskey.
That really rounds it off, yeah.
Just a little bit more in there. So we started in 150 square metres in a business incubator, just on the outskirts of Albany, and if it wasn't for that business incubator, this distillery never would have been.
Okay.
So yeah, we were very lucky. There was the Albany Business Centre, and I approached them and said, I want to set up a whisky distillery, and can I start it here while I'm looking for a site? And they were like, yeah, no worries, go for it. So we had our first sort of 2.5 years there, or 2 years, 2005, 2007, and then 2006 we'd bought this property on Frenchman Bay Road, and then we redeveloped this and moved our distillery here. So as I say, without that business incubator, there would have been no Limeburners.
Well, thank you, incubator.
Absolutely, yeah, full of support for them. And then we grew. So 2014, we bought a property in Margaret River, and so my view was always to try and create an asset, a legacy that I could pass on to my children. You know, so I have never been motivated by profit with this. It's always been very much, let's make great whiskey.
It's definitely coming through.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And then hopefully, pass it on to my kids. So I was then also looking at, well, how do we create, Australia's premium spirits house? Because that was sort of our goal.
Yep.
We'd always made gin as well. I'd been a spirits person, not a wine or a beer person. So we bought a property in Margaret River and moved all of our gin production there, created a unique gin distillery. And then 2014, I've got to think about it, 2014 we bought a property in the Porongurups. And my whiskey journey started with American bourbon. And if I'm fully honest, it would have been Jim Beam and Jack Daniels, and then there was a Sherman T. Cooper and some other great bourbons that I'd had.
Yeah.
And I thought, I grew up on a farm up north, a little place called Bunteen, on wheat and sheep, and I thought, why aren't we making whiskey in Australia? We're making this stuff called Bundaberg rum, which I don't like.
No.
That was
The small releases are good.
And I think we're actually spoilt. I think we have a world-class rum there that's just too readily available.
Yeah.
So
everyone knows Bundy. Everyone's drunk Bundy. Yeah.
But rum wasn't my thing at that time, and I hadn't tried the single estate rums and things. I really now appreciate fine rums. But I thought, I'm not into Bundy, so why aren't we making whiskey?
Yeah.
And that really, I guess, planted the seed when I was 18 of going, I'd like to make whiskey, set up a whiskey distillery. I remember telling my dad, and he told me I was a effing idiot. I realised pretty quickly I didn't have the technical expertise, nor the knowledge, nor the resources to do it. But
it's in your blood. You've got the history.
Well, look, I have. My grandfather came from Scotland in 1912, and my dad told me a story about the family back in a little place called Clackmannan in Scotland. They had a water-driven flour mill, and of course, twisting your grains, one of the key steps in making whiskey.
Yeah.
And they had a legal distillery out in a glen, and the English police were offering a job in your local distiller. And evidently the family needed to replace the boiler they were using. Their still was still good, but their boiler was shot. So they left the boiler in place, stripped the still out and took that away, reported their location to the police, and then used that reward money to go and buy a new boiler.
That is smart.
Well, I just sort of thought that strikes
That's awesome.
Ingenuity,
yeah.
Australian larrikin attitude coming through.
Totally.
Sure. So I sort of thought, it is, it's my family's been doing it, it's in the blood. Grew up on a farm, so actually let's do this. So then I had 16 years of research, travelling to distilleries, volunteering, working in distilleries, going to Tasmania and, being fortunate enough to have some good time with Bill Lark. And then saying, actually, let's do it. I rang up my wife one day. I was working as a lawyer in the city and said, I hate my job. Let's move to the country and make whiskey. And Tracy said, yep, no worries, let's go. So that was the other key thing was the support from my partner to say, let's do it.
And that certainly makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And not only that, Albany, it's almost like a little Scotland. I was born here. I'm white as white can be white.
In fact, when we bought this site, there were Scottish thistles growing on the site, like the proper Scottish thistles. We had a Scottish distiller out here for a couple of years working with us who said when he drove down Porongurup National Park, just along Frenchman Bay, he said, it reminds me of Scotland. You've got the hills and, it's like heather.
Green, cloudy
absolutely.
And rainy.
Yeah, all those.
All those
rain
iconic
is
things.
Tomorrow's whiskey.
That's exactly right.
So look, I've added a little bit more whiskey in there. It's still, I reckon now it's probably about 40% ABV for me.
Yeah.
So it's a bit fatter in the flavour profile. This is certainly staying at the very back of my palate, so that the front palate is sweet, hangs around for quite a while, but most of that flavour's halfway back, 3/4 of the way back. Yeah.
Yep.
I think the peat is nicely integrated. It's not a smack in the face type of peat. You know, yeah. Look, I'm personally really chuffed with this as a whiskey, and you know, this is the ideal. We want to keep making great whiskey.
Oh, that is so good. I mean, you're getting that American oak, and then that peat's going along with it. As you say, it's integrated nicely with it. It's not right at the front and then smack, and then you get something underneath. It's going along with the journey and hangs on there. Yeah. Right at the back. Yep. Beautiful.
So that's the heavy peat, which I guess I'm taking it right to the very top of our whiskies. But it's an enjoyable whiskey. Look, I don't know that I'd call this a session whiskey. You know, I think I'd probably have a couple of these and I'd be like, yep, okay, you know, I've enjoyed that. You know, now let's go and find something different to have.
Yeah.
But I think as an outstanding, beautiful drink to have. It's a very light golden colour, which is again just
very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, almost that pale straw, bright gold.
Yep. Very strawy.
Which is then those American oak bourbon barrels.
Yeah, coming through nicely. Yeah, I could definitely sit on this for a long session. Not a problem at all. Oh, that's delicious.
Look, it is, and I think the aromas are staying very consistent. So you're not getting any, you know, wafting of strong characteristics and then disappearing. There's no astringency with it. You know, so it's certainly something that here at the distillery we're really proud with.
It's very rounded, no brittle, spiky parts whatsoever. Yeah, it's lovely.
Now I'm going to put mine in with my port cask because I'm going to use that same glass again, I reckon.
Yep.
So what we're going to go for now is the Darkest Winter.
I've been excited to try this one. I've heard really good things.
Now, Darkest Winter, you talk about us sort of putting Western Australia on the map. Jim Murray, who's probably one of the two most respected whiskey critics in the world. He can be controversial from some people's point of view, but you know, phenomenal knowledge. He's certainly always, from my perspective, been a great guy.
I mean, the Whiskey Bible, it's called a Bible for a reason.
Absolutely, yeah. And he wrote in the Whiskey Bible in 2019 that this distillery has single-handedly put Western Australia on the map as one of the world's great whiskey producing regions. Now, I read that and I was just blown away.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, how big an accolade is that?
Yeah, so you couldn't really ask for more than that, you know, as a craft producer. Our core values here are honesty, integrity, trust, respect, and humbleness. So that's probably humbleness is a key thing. We don't want to get lost in, we're making great whiskey and we're the best. I think we can always learn from people. We go to another distillery and we try and go, okay, well, what are you guys doing and how can we, you know, continue to improve what we're doing? Yeah. So we don't get lost in, we're doing great whiskey. We really try to come back with, you know, come on, let's keep it earthy, down to earth, be humble, and let's just continue on our journey.
And that comes across and people appreciate that.
Look, I appreciate that too, thank you. So Darkest Winter, let me grab unfortunately I don't have a full bottle here. Now there is some comment around whiskey changing in the bottle. So the traditional thing is, of course, wine will mature in a bottle, whereas whiskey, they'd say, won't change. You're a science man, and I'm a science man. I would say, well, there's definitely going to be some molecular change.
It definitely changes. Yeah, from a neck pour halfway down all the way through, the oxidization, all that stuff is happening.
So oxidization is oxygen molecules then reacting with the spirit. So the same sort of thing that causes rust on metal. What that usually does with whiskey is actually makes the whiskey a little bit more approachable, in my experience. So oxidization is good for spirits. Oxidization is terrible from a winemaker's point of view.
They don't want that.
Yeah. So this will be a slightly different flavoured whiskey because it's. I have to put my bottle down, my glass down. Because it is half empty, and my staff obviously don't want me to get into it.
Cheers.
This one, and I'm going to have some myself. This I was mentioning here in Albany, because we're right on the edge of the harbour of the ocean, because it's a relatively humid place, because we've got the ocean there, we actually lose more ethanol, more alcohol evaporates out of the barrels than water. At our other site in Porongurup, we're 300 metres above sea level, much drier, and we should be the other way around. We should actually have more water evaporate from the barrels and less ethanol.
Yeah, so more alcohol coming in.
More alcohol, so they'll actually go up. We bottle it, a barrel at 64.5%, and here we will drop down, we're about 61%, sometimes a little bit lower than that. This one here that we're trying is actually the first cask we've ever had, and I'll just let you read the ABV on here.
69.5%.
So the very first cask we've ever had that's actually increased in ABV. We've got no idea why. You know, science can explain a lot, but there's a lot
Magic
of mystery. A lot of mystery in a barrel. So now this is the bottom layer of the peat bog. So the darkest winter is, and look, I came up with that name because for me, personally, I really love my whiskies, my peated whiskies in winter. When it's cold and I want a fire around me and I want to feel warm.
That is the iconic time to have it. But
It is.
Me personally, I have it any time.
Anytime. Look, I do too,
yeah.
but you know, if I had a preference, if I'd go right, you know, I'd probably, heat of summer, I'd probably go an American oak or a sherry cask.
Yeah, a bit more light, yeah.
Yeah,
yep.
exactly. Much more sessionable. When it's the middle of winter and I want something, you know, really warming, that's when I'd be going for this type of whiskey. Yeah. But again, you know, each their own, and you do you and I'll do me, and I think that makes the world go round.
I mean, for that ABV, I'm not getting that smacked in your face.
It's still, you know, certainly very pleasant.
It's there, but it's not, it's not offensive whatsoever. It's nice and subtle, and I'm getting massive amounts of honey, like red gum honey, straight off the nose.
Yeah. I've stepped ahead of you there. I'm rushing in and tasting this. You're enjoying the
I'm
aromas
enjoying the
there.
nose. Oh, that is yummy.
Look, much different whiskey
Right,
from
going
in. Going in. Take one for the team. Much different whiskey from the heavy peat. It is a bit more of that punch, you know, as you put it in there. There is a little, because that higher ABV, but it's not a nasty burn. You know,
I'm not getting that burn. It's there, but right towards the end of the palate, I'm getting, okay, there's alcohol at the top here, but I'm getting all this flavour burst underneath it. Whereas some other strong ABVs, it's like bang, straight away, in your face, burns, and then you might get something underneath. This is flavour all the way through with that little ABV on top.
Yeah. No, look, I agree. I think for 69.5, it's
that's amazing.
yeah, phenomenally smooth.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Again, look, really beautiful aromas coming off this. As you say, I get a lot of that honey. I'm getting a little bit of that sort of smoked bacon ham hock characteristic from the peat there as well.
It reminds me of the Arnott's bacon biscuits. I'm getting that.
I'll take that as a compliment. We're West Australians. We used to have those as a bit of core diet. Look, I think, again, really sweet characteristics as well. This is a bit more of an explosion in your mouth as you put it in there. It's a bit more, you know, it's there, it's present, but I think a really well-balanced, well-integrated, beautiful flavour.
I let that one sit around and roll around a bit more to get the full palate experience. And yeah, the ABV is a little bit more there. You can actually distinguish it now.
Yeah.
But that honey's rolling around, and then you get that smoke flowing through it as well. Wow, that is. I can understand why this is. That's a magic barrel.
It is a magic barrel. Yeah, absolutely it is. We import 2 container loads a year of barrels out of America, so 40-foot high containers. Plus we source a lot of winery barrels. And when I take you out to the Porongurups, you'll see we have our own barrel program where we've got port and sherry just sitting in. We've got about 120 barrels out there that we're just maturing our own port and sherry for fortifieds. So one of our big issues is making sure we have continuity of supply.
Yeah.
When we started, we were Whisky Distillery number 5 in the country. So back in 2005.
But the first in WA.
First in WA, yes, we were, absolutely. Now there's about 300 distilleries around Australia.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the supply and demand effect on the price of good fortifieds. In fact, they've tripled in price. And they're harder to get hold of now.
Yeah.
So thankfully we've got great relationships with the coopers, still look after us, but it is meaning that, you know, there's a lot greater costs now than what we ever had before.
Yeah, and so you're having to look after your barrels as well.
We are. We have a really nice story. We've got a cooper, Gordon, who started his life as a cooper in Scotland at Whisky Distillery.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's now almost retiring, and he's starting to pass those skills on to us of how you do coopering.
That's great.
Yeah, so he comes out and does our recharring program for us on site. So in the Porongurups, he'll shave the cask, then reburn them, and in fact there's a fair bit of intellectual property around how you deal with that.
That's a big art.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So it's really good for us to sort of have access to that skill level, plus also be able to bring those skills sort of in-house.
So you're not actually malting your barley on site, but I did hear that you're going to, yeah.
And look, it's a bit of a conundrum for me, because if it's not broke, don't fix it.
True.
And malting is a whole new level of science. It's a totally different process. And again, every single step, this level of humidity, this temperature,
you've got to get it right.
You have to get it right.
Yeah.
So in the Porongurups, we are building our own malting plant, and my idea is certainly to go from paddock to bottle, so that we've got farmers who are already supplying us grain where we're using that, and we will start to malt our own. It'll be within 3 months that plant will be finished.
Okay.
But we won't move exclusively to our own malted barley because we'll still want to keep, this. So we source from 2 large maltsters in Perth. These are large global companies, top level science, top level laboratories, everything else there.
So similar to Port Ellen in Scotland, where a lot of the guys in Islay get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll start to supply barley then to some of the microbreweries.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So
are you going to peat that barley as well?
We will do some peating. So when we peat our barley, it's a bit different from Scotland's. During the malting process, you have to germinate the grain, get it wet, it germinates.
Yep.
And then after the rootlets have just appeared out the end, you have to dry the grain out, so you kill the plant. And they would use, or traditionally they'd use peat fires for that, and that's where the smoke came from. Now here we source malt that has already been, or grain that's already been malted.
And then you're smoking
Then we smoke it after that. Now the science behind it is that shouldn't work, because you should actually be dropping your enzyme activity by doing that. But we actually find we get higher yields of alcohol by doing that process.
It likes it.
It does like it. It likes it. It's telling us we're doing something right.
Well, if it likes it, I like it.
That's it. So I suspect that we'll keep that same peating process. It'll be malted and dried, and then peat smoked after that. Again, I think 69. It's just unbelievable, the ABV.
It's not there. It really isn't. It just
Smooth.
It's amazing how that amount of ABV, it comes across as a low 40s. It really, it's just, wow. I'm speechless.
We've been very lucky, I must say. A lot of hard work. Now, I'm going to try and do a
Tiny little drop, yeah.
Oh, that time I might have got it right. I might have put 4 drops in, still maybe more than what you'd like.
Yeah, Scotty 4 drops.
Yeah. So do you think the other boys are going to feel a bit jealous about you?
I think they're going to, well, when we reviewed the last one, they were like, I want to go to Albany. And I said, well, we need to come down here and actually do some filming down here. And
You're always welcome, fellas.
Yep, we're definitely going to come down here.
So again, it's a little bit broader now on my palate. That sweetness is coming through, but the malt characteristic is much more present. So for Australians, you get wheat bix, almost that wheat bixy type of flavour.
Yeah. I'm actually getting the esters coming through a lot stronger.
Yeah, which will again, as we were talking about before, those flavours coming out now, separating off. So there's some good science behind adding water to whiskey. A little bit more Christmas. The peat smoke now is a little bit more present for me as well.
That barrel.
Yeah.
That's popping through, yeah.
And it's interesting, it's a little bit of a drier finish, but it's still a very long finish. It's not dry and short, it's sort of that dry.
Still going.
Yeah.
I'm chewing on it, as I like to say.
Yes, yeah. I think that's a real opportunity to do that with this whiskey.
Oh, that is good. They're all good. I couldn't pick a favourite.
Look, it's people will ask me what's my favourite whiskey, and
I was going to ask you what's your favourite whiskey. So, what's your favourite that you produce?
Yep.
And what would be your favourite, say, Scottish whiskey?
It's a bit like asking me which is my favourite child. I've got 3 kids, and they're all my favourites.
Yeah.
And for good reason. They're all different. They're all different characters, but they're all great characters. It's the same with our whiskey.
It's one of the hardest questions to answer, and it changes every time someone answers.
It does, yeah. So if we do. If I look back at some of our phenomenal whiskies, and I think all of our whiskies are of a certain standard, and then you'll get some which I think are just outstanding. Some of the musket casks we've done, so cask strength musket barrels, are just phenomenal. A peated port that we did as a director's cut was
I really like the sound of that. I love port, I love peat, and peat and port together. Ooh, you've got my attention there.
Okay, and then the other day I tried our American oak, which is like the beginning of our whiskey. It's the beginning of the journey. And I was just drinking it going, that's a phenomenal whiskey. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, and we loved it.
I did see that review. Yeah, I was sitting there nervous, going, "Oh, how's this going to go, fellas?"
No. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I know. Look, thank you very much. And certainly, look, as a team, yes, I'm the founder and I'm the key driver, and it's my palate that chooses everything. But we couldn't do this without a team of phenomenal people.
That's right.
So, we've had Ben Kagi here for 13 years. We've got John Wallace, who you'll meet today, who's distilling the Porongurups, who's, he's worked and gone and come back. And so we do have a lot of people who've been here for a long time. We're all committed to making great whiskey, and I think that's probably the key, the very key thing.
Exactly, the team experience coming across. Yeah.
I'd love to say I do it all, but the distillery is too big. I can't mash and brew and distill and taste.
You don't have 5 lives.
Really like that. I think it's beautiful, really, really lovely whiskey. Quite unique. It's unlike. It's not, and I didn't ever set out to copy Scotch, or with our Tiger Snake, which is also known as Knox Bourbon. We didn't try to copy bourbons either. We took inspiration from those whiskies and said, we want to make Australian whiskey. Yeah. We want something that actually reflects the place from where the whiskey is born. And there's that old Bernard Shaw saying that, whiskey is liquid sunshine in a bottle. And, and I think there's a lot of truth to that because, the grain soaks up the sun, produces these beautiful heads, and then that's what we use to make alcohol. So this really is the sun's energy we've got in a glass.
Exactly right. And going back to that new make, that barley is right there, and it's coming all the way through. Yeah. Yep.
So
that's absolutely brilliant.
Do you think we should turn off the cameras and move on to some barrel samples?
I think we should. Bye.
So what's your actual role here at Limeburners?
Well, I'm the head distiller here, which...
So you're the man that makes all the magic happen?
Well, I've done just about every role here, so I have done just about everything in the production side of things. I've got quite a big team of people. I'm looking over most of our distillers now.
Okay.
Got a younger crop of distillers coming through, and I kind of have a look over them and kind of try and mentor them and guide them as to the best way forward when making fine quality whiskey.
How did you get into the whiskey industry?
Originally, I've come out of winemaking, and I suppose it was that fermentation science. That was what I originally did. When we were studying winemaking, one of the professors there always used to kind of finish off a lecture showing us a still and alluded to the incredible aromas that you could get when you distilled anything. So that was kind of, I suppose, where the curiosity came from. When I started studying, I was studying agribusiness.
Okay.
I was looking at broadacre farming here in Western Australia. My family had pastoral farming concerns. I hadn't been into broadacre farming. So I went to Muresk, which is in the hills out of Perth. I'm not sure if the campus is still going there. Holiday work was seeding and harvesting and working with grains. A trip to Europe, up to Scotland, wasn't a drinker back then, but I saw the distilleries around the place. I suppose it was having people more informed, better than myself, that had this kind of passion for distilling. And also, as winemakers, our ultimate thing was to get away from all the wine and sit down and have a good whiskey. So my first whiskey that I can truly say I remember, there were whiskies before that, but the one I can truly remember is Lagavulin.
Lagavulin 16? Oh, man of my own heart. Yep.
So I think that's, I've met quite a few people like that who, that's the really first significant whiskey.
Yeah.
Had a lot of whiskies, but that was the first one that made them think, geez, this is really something. I suppose that started it all, and it was over in New Zealand. I was doing a stint of winemaking over in New Zealand, and we used to I started collecting whiskies over there, and I suppose that's where I really set up the interest. I came back to Australia, kept on working in winemaking for a while, but then I saw this opportunity down here with Cameron developing a new industry down here, and it just came as a natural progression.
Yep. So you built up that interest over time, and then when the opportunity came, you were like, yep, this is for me.
Yeah, just kind of went for it. I mean, it was a bit opportunistic when it happened. I saw it up here, but as soon as I had a bit of experience working with Cameron, and we had another Scottish distiller at the time, and later on we had a master distiller come from Germany, and working with those guys, it just really piqued the interest. At first I was just kind of watching them from the sideline, seeing what they were doing. It was a bit of a new field. Working with people coming from overseas was interesting because they were bringing skills which we didn't have here before. And working with Cameron, who was very dynamic, it was a really interesting gig to take on. At first I was just managing those guys, trying to translate for them mostly.
Yeah.
I can understand a bit of Scottish, and I tried to understand a bit of German, because our master distiller was from Germany. And I'd just say thanks to those guys and Cameron for giving us the opportunity, being in the industry very young at the right time.
Yeah, and making some amazing product.
Well, thank you.